Hey guys, today's video we are having a showdown between the Bosch GKT13 and the Festool TS55 track saws. I got both of these saws at Acme Tools. The Festool TS55 came with a case, 55-inch track, splinter guard, and a track stop for $690 and comes with a 3-year warranty. The Bosch came with a case and hose adapter for $599. If you purchase a comparable track and track stop, the total comes to $732.99, and Bosch only offers a 1-year warranty. We're going to take an in-depth look at both saws, comparing all their features and perform some tests. Let's start by looking at the blades. Now, there are many blades for different applications that can be purchased, and we'll be going over those in a different video. For this video, we'll be comparing what comes with the saw. The Festool comes with a 6 1/4 inch 48 tooth blade with a .063 plate and a .087 tooth. The tooth configuration is the same on both blades for both saws. They have a 5-degree hook, 15-degree top bevel, and a 15-degree top clearance angle. The TS55 can cut 2 1/16 inches at 90 degrees and 1 3/8 inches at 45 degrees on the track. The Bosch comes with a 6 1/2 inch 48 tooth blade. The saw plate is .048 and the teeth are .069. The Bosch can cut 2 1/8 inches at 90 degrees and 1 7/16 inches at 45 degrees on the track. The Bosch has a larger cutting depth, but the blade plate is 24% thinner than the TS55. This could affect the cut, especially in thicker wood. Now let's look at the power of each saw. But before we look at that, I want to clear up an idea I've heard quite a few times. That the TS55 seems less powerful because people are using the wrong blade. The power of a saw has nothing to do with what blade you use and everything to do with the design and specs of the motor. The right blade can help reduce the resistance on the motor so it doesn't overpower the torque, but it doesn't change the power of the saw. I'll be doing a test later that really shows the difference power makes. But let's start by looking at the motors. Starting with the Bosch, here are the motor specs. 120 volts at 13 amps, equaling 1,560 watts, giving the Bosch 2.09 horsepower. The TS55 is 120 volts at 10 amps, equaling 1,200 watts and 1.6 horsepower. Here's a shot of Festool's TS75, which is the bigger and more powerful brother to the TS55. And you can see it also has a 120 volt 13 amp motor like the Bosch. They both have a plunge and trigger lock activated by one button. Depth gauge on the TS55 is a little more ergonomic and can be done with one finger. The gauge also shows both depth measurements at once, with and without the track. The Bosch uses 2 fingers to squeeze and release the lock and requires that you manually turn the knob for the depth gauge when on or off the track. The TS55 also has a fine adjustment knob to accurately dial in the depth. The Bosch has no adjustment. The Bosch and Festool both have a -1 degree adjustment and a 47 degree adjustment. The Bosch and the TS55 both have a 90-degree stop adjustment. The Bosch also has a 45-degree adjustment, but the TS55 does not. It must be sent in if it goes out. I personally rather have the ability to adjust it. Both saws store an Allen wrench in the handle for blade changing. The blade lock lever on the TS55 engages the plunge mechanism and locks the blade all in one, making for an easy blade change. The Bosch lever only locks the saw in the changing position, and you still need to push the plunge lock to lower the saw and hold down the blade lock button to loosen the blade stud. Otherwise, changing the blade is very simple. The TS55 comes with a riving knife, which is a very handy accessory, especially when cutting thicker wood or slabs. The riving knife not only helps with the safety of the cut, but also the quality of the cut. Both saws have a chip guard / window, but the TS55 comes with a splinter guard, and I don't believe Bosch has an auxiliary splinter guard. Both saws are brushed motors and have easy access to change the brushes when needed. Both saws have a speed control dial from 1 to 6. Track knobs on the TS55 use cam action to press small strips of plastic against the aluminum track. The strips reduce the surface area and the plastic helps reduce friction, allowing the saw to slide smoother. On the Bosch, there's a plastic lever that pushes the saw edge up against the track edge. Because there isn't any relief, the entire saw edge is in contact with the track edge. This increases the friction and makes it a little harder to push when you set the saw with 0 play. When flush cutting with the Bosch, you have 1 3/8 inch offset due to the protruding dust connection. And on the TS55, you only have a 5/8 inch offset because of the flatter design. Next is the tracks. The Festool track uses 2 3/4 inch foam strips glued to the bottom of the track for traction, and a flexible plastic splinter guard that is also glued to the track. On top of the track, there are 2 glide strips to help reduce friction when sliding the saw. I've found that the splinter guard has trouble staying adhered on the ends, and when exposed to different temperatures can delaminate. The foam traction strips will wear down over time and need to be replaced. Here I'm performing a friction test using an OSB panel. The new track holds up to 54 degrees, and the old one only 25 degrees. Here's the same test using a melamine board, and the Festool held up to 50 degrees. That's only a 4-degree difference from the OSB. The Bosch uses 2 1/8 inch rubber strips pressed into a groove for traction on the bottom of the track, and uses a rubber splinter guard that gets slid into a groove. There are no glide strips on top of the rail. You can see in the friction test the Bosch didn't perform as well as the Festool, sliding at 47 degrees. I don't have any longevity testing with the Bosch track to see when it loses traction, but all tracks lose traction over time. Here is the melamine test using the Bosch track, and it slid at 32 degrees. That's 18 degrees less than the Festool track. The Bosch track needed more downward force to secure the track when making a cut, especially when cutting 45 degrees on a smooth surface like melamine. I also noticed that sawdust affected the friction strips more because there was less surface area. A nice feature of the track is the ease in which you can change out the friction strips and splinter guard, not having to deal with any adhesive. Starting with the Bosch, cutting 1.5 inch Doug fir at 90 degrees. The saw did a decent job and produced a clean cut. Next is the 45 degree cut in 1.5 inch Doug fir. The Bosch only cuts 1 7/16 inch deep at 45, so there was a 16th inch sliver left over, but produced a clean cut. Then the 45 degree double miter cut in melamine. If you look closely, you can see the track slightly move as I'm making the cut. I was making a slow and controlled cut to prevent this, and it still happened. This is an issue I've been having on smooth surfaces with this track. It took a lot of force to keep the track from moving. In the end, the cut turned out okay. Now the TS55, starting with the 90 degree cut in 1.5 inch Doug fir. Also did a decent job and produced a clean cut. Next is the 45 degree cut in 1.5 inch Doug fir. The TS55 only cuts 1 3/8 inch at 45, So there was an 1/8 inch sliver left over, but produced a clean cut. Then the 45-degree double miter cut in melamine. As you can see, it produced a clean cut and a decent miter. Now a little power test. Cutting at 90 degrees through 1.5 inch thick dug fir and trying to push the saw through the material. I pushed all saws with the same force. The TS55 stalled 7 times, and the Bosch only stalled 3 times. The Bosch does have a thinner blade, which helps reduce the resistance on the motor, but you can tell the Bosch has more power. Here you can see the regular 15 amp Bosch skill saw and how easily it cuts through the material, even with a used 60-tooth finish blade. Final thoughts. Both saws performed well with only a few small differences. The Bosch had more power, which is nice, and if you're going to use it more in the construction field for cutting sheathing, framing lumber, and sizing plywood, the Bosch with its added power and speed of cut will come in handy. When it comes to features like blade lock, depth stop, track knobs, saw markings, the TS55 is definitely more refined. Comparing tracks, the Festool has better traction and the design brings less friction when pushing the saw. I personally like the wider footprint of the Festool track for stability, though I can see where a smaller, lighter track would come in handy, especially in the framing world. I personally don't like connecting tracks together and have purchased longer tracks for that reason. I'm not sure Bosch has a track capable of cutting an 8-foot sheet without joining tracks. I have heard good things about the Bosch track connector, but have not used it to test its accuracy. A very smart design feature by Bosch was to allow the saw to be used on different tracks, since that mostly boils down to personal preference and what you might already own. So the two major differences are the power and the riving knife. If you're mostly cutting sheet goods or framing material, then you might lean towards power. If you're cutting solid wood and slabs, the riving knife really comes in handy for quality cuts. But honestly, if you're mostly doing slabs, I would opt for the TS75. It has a 13 amp motor with a much bigger depth of cut. Thank you for watching. I hope you find this review helpful. Please hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I'll see you next time.